welcome. This session on how open data is changing the world. I have a great panel selected in front of us. Paul Maltby, who is Director of Transparency for the UK government. We have Rufus Pollock, who is founder of the Open Knowledge Foundation, a Shuttleworth Fellow. We have Schee, who's a freelance and general all-round serial entrepreneur. And Martin Tisné from the Omidyar Foundation. I'm Nigel Shadbolt. I'm your chairman today. And what I'm going to try and do is get around a range of viewpoints from our panelists on where open data is making a difference, where it's materially making a difference, and then we'll open up to some Q&A with the actual audience here. So first question I'd like to ask, and I guess I might start with Paul, is can you think of an example, and ask you all to think of examples of an application or a particular use case of open data that you would use to kind of convince a government, a business, that this has made a material difference?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, we've all got probably our own favourites we'll hear across the panel, but I think some of the things we've seen on the transport side is probably one of the modes where it's been most earliest adopted. The things that enable you to see when your bus is arriving, your train, your tube, where parking is available. I think it's really, we've sort of taken it on as if it's just a normal part, it's just an everyday shift, but actually there's something really powerful underneath that. I think thinking about on the future, those sorts of things that I show colleagues around in government to say this is actually how it could be transformational, some of the things on the health side. So I like, for instance, applications like GP ratings, which are a really simple way of starting to show how you can have citizen voice and choice within a public service system that really starts to...
Rufus, do you have a standout example?
Yeah, I kind of have a couple, I think. I mean, one actually to mention about the health, well, here in the UK, I think, has been very interesting, and you kind of see the evolution of this was around the prescribing analytics and stuff. So going from the government, I think now 2 years ago, saying, okay, we're going to open up prescription information at the GP level, not at the personal level, but at the level of practices. And then I think Ben Goldacre and Open Healthcare UK, Carl Reynolds last year talking, and then at the Hack Day, we helped organise along, I think it took place at the ODI, that we helped organise. They kind of turned that into an actual something that looked at it, and then work afterwards, I think with Mastodon C and others, to actually say, okay, we've had an idea, and the idea was a really clever one, which I think I should really credit Ben Goldacre for, I believe, and Carl, was this idea of, okay, people maybe are prescribing the wrong kind of drugs. Maybe you could have a cheaper, non-branded drug, and there's some other one, and GPs are prescribing the more expensive drug, and then we could save real money for government. I think it's a great example because one is that you demonstrated that was the case. There's estimated £200 million saving from the work that was done on that for government by GPs giving you the cheaper generic option.
That was for one type of drug as well, for statins, right?
Right, just for one type of drug. For statins is a great example. And I think it's also an example of why open data is powerful because in theory, that data has been available for government for a while. But no one had seen that needle, if you like, in the haystack. And I think it's a really powerful example of saving big bucks for government, probably improving people's lives because that money can then be reallocated to other stuff in the health service. And I think the other kinds of examples, I sometimes see the multitude. I mean, just one I saw recently was like looking and changing behavior and changing government policy around deaths in slaughterhouses in Brazil, actually. It was that there's incredibly often been very poor worker treatment and regulation of slaughterhouses. There was a lot of accidents. And the data investigation and then action had actually led to changes in policy and a change in government treatment that was going to be saving workers' lives. So I mean that was the kind of example again where getting information out had been really powerful, I think.
TH, how do you motivate and convince people that open data is changing the world?
Well, I think I'm bringing some of the examples from Asia Pacific. I think starting from probably Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and all the way up to Korea, South Korea, and Japan. I think we are seeing a change in the understanding of how the government works by encouraging younger people and entrepreneurs, even high-profile developers within those regions to work on open data. And for example, I'll take the case from Taiwan. We have around 2,000 developers right now who would like to volunteer their engineering talent and to work for government. on some of the application levels or whatever. So there are a lot of cases and a lot of pop-up organizations or communities going on right now. I think that would be the biggest thing that I've found to be very exciting, because for the young people, they are generally kind of discouraged from engaging with the government talks, so they will just shut themselves away from government. But now you are seeing a trend of abundance of human talent to work on things that really matter in the society.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Martin?
I think there's a number of different reasons that people mentioned for doing open data. I mean, there's three very powerful ones. There's the one that Rufus mentioned, which is essentially economic efficiency, savings in government in an age of austerity. Rufus talked about that very well. I thought another one which is linked is just economic development growth through open data, especially in the United States. That goes to the healthcare piece. For example, the US CTO Todd Park's been doing these data paloozas. A number of startups have been created as a result. So the economic growth case for open data. Then the third one, I think, is just empowerment from the point of view of the citizens and how you can change the relationship between citizens and the government. So essentially, being able to hold government and being able to hold the private sector to account for open data. So there, I think, a potential and potentially very dramatic example is around open corporate data, the work that Open Corporates does in the UK and globally, and really being able to map corporations and money flows in a way that we just have not been able to do up until now.
Yeah. I think those are all, very material examples. I mean, one of my favorites was actually spending data in the UK was released by local authorities, and everything they spend above £500 every month had to be published. And this was a cause for some alarm in a lot of the local authorities. It turns out, though, that as a piece of raw material for business intelligence, we now have companies selling back procurement advice to those local authorities, 260 of them, and selling that advice back based on open data. And I think it's a very, both it's an efficiency saving for the local authorities who aren't paying over the odds, and it's a service that's generating money for the companies selling the business intelligence. So I guess we all kind of imagine the use cases. It's pretty material, I think, to ask yourself, what do you see as the most exciting developments in the open data scene currently? I mean, who'd like to take the most exciting developments? Rufus, I mean, what's the kind of thing that excites you at the minute about the open data world?
Well, I think some of the things is, one is sometimes the volume of data we're starting to get is substantial, and is for a period of time that we haven't had before. So I think, you mentioned spending as an example. The fact you just now have your ability to do historical comparisons and trends, and the fact that you see that this is here to stay. Almost that's not a development, but I think it's one of the big worries, I think, in the first year or two. And remember, a lot of the cases are only like 3-4 years maximum old. Was it just a sense, if I was a company, a lot of the question you always ask is this going to be around for a year and then it's going to be gone? I think the other aspect, and I think I really want to echo Martin, it's an area that we do a lot of work on at the Open Knowledge Foundation in relation to open spending and finances, but it's this ability to start connecting up. The power of open data, strictly, is the ability to connect data sets together. Most bluntly, sometimes it's getting access to data you never had before, but bluntly, if there's some really valuable data set, often some companies paid somewhere for it before and has done something, but it's the ability to connect, and it's also the ability to empower people who aren't so well off. And I think in the area of finance that we gave the example, the problem is you normally need several data sets. To give an example, even the spending in the UK, okay, I get information from the government, but then I have a hell of a time working out which companies these are and whether they're actually, these 15 different names I've got are actually the same company. What about matching spending with the procurement contract? That's the most interesting question. Government, when it bought this service, how much did they actually pay? For example,
so you're giving me problems as well as opportunities.
But just to finish that, I'll give an example recently. I spoke to someone from Brazil where people might be aware there have been these protests, particularly around public transport, and he was saying to me, look, we've been working on this just in the last few weeks, and one of the issues we know, talking to an insider in the ministry, is, well, it's not, you look at the contracts, you look at it, but unless you actually saw the actual payments that were going out, you didn't realize everything looked hunky-dory. So it's that you need these several things, and we're starting to get that. Okay. We are starting to get that, and I think that's very exciting.
And Paul, yeah.
You mentioned about Brazil. I think one of the most exciting things for me, without question, is open data essentially going global. So last month, during the UK presidency of the G8, which we're in, the G8 nations signed the G8 Open Data Charter. And for me, it's a really significant step to say we, the largest industrialized countries are all committing to open data and defining what that means in actually some depth, and saying that we're intending to make us to go to open data by default. And I think this, for something that's essentially, someone mentioned, just an agenda, a movement that's perhaps, it's certainly not in double figures in terms of the years that it's been around. And in some ways you might say, the really hardcore bit of it's only 3 or 4 years old. To be able to go and move to a global stage like that is really significant. And the UK is also the lead co-chair of the Open Government Partnership this year, this sort of club of now 60 countries and the reformers within those countries. And to be able to bring something like the Open Data Charter from the G8 and say, like, let's take that to a global level, and let's take it to the OGP conference in October, and to talk to other countries around that and see that being disseminated through other international fora, I think is something really, truly striking. We're still in that, colleagues at the ODI sometimes say, we're sort of in the 1993 moment for open data when you're comparing it to the internet. But this data revolution, we're in it, and it's about to continue, certainly through the next decade. And to know that we've got that infrastructure there, not just at a national level, but now at an international level, and still a long way to go, but some of those really important building blocks in place, and it's very exciting about the potential that
Martin,
arises from this.
Sure. Just briefly, also on the chart in terms of recent developments, but I think it's important to recognise that open data is a really young field. Globally, we've been working on community working, thinking globally about transparency and accountability issues for about 25 years. And open data, I'd say, really sort of burst into the mainstream around 2007 or 8 in the UK with the Power of Information report, 2009 with the Open Government Directive in the United States. And two things that are badly needed. One of them is, how do we maintain momentum around open data beyond the lifespan of any one government? And I think that's a very exciting recent development. So the US Open Data Policy does that. The G8 Open Data Charter that we hope will be global does that. That's one really, really big piece. And then the other one is just, pegging the level of ambition. What does good open data mean? How do you set the standard for open data? In the Open Government Partnership, which is 60 different countries, the most popular, the number one commitment out of hundreds of commitments has to do with open data. But what we really need to do now is set, okay, this is the standard, this is what you're monitored against, this is what open data looks like. If we don't have that, and I'll sort of preempt some sort of questions about threats, if we don't have that, there's a risk of open washing, and then everyone can do it.
We'll come on to threats shortly. So TH, from your point of view, what's really exciting? And tell us perhaps about the Open Data Alliance as well.
Well, I think the exciting thing is that if you could not persuade the government to release the data to the public, because there are some regulations behind that to prohibit the government to release the data, you could just produce the data by yourself by making hardwares. For example, when you don't have the radioactivity level, or just like things happening in Singapore because of the haze, the pollution level, so you can make cheap hardwares by yourself or sensors by yourself and deploy it in large quantity around your house, neighborhood, and etc. So we are seeing some trends of young and affluent developers doing things by themselves. If they cannot get data out of the government, they will simply generate data by themselves and donate back to the government. So that creates an interesting dialogue between the citizens who could actually produce much more reliable, provide a reliable source of data, and it's good for the society and good for the people as well.
Very good example. You mentioned threats then. Just give us a sense of where you see the kind of potential grey clouds.
Sure. I think there's at least a couple, if not more. I think the big one is that open data is faddish, and everyone loves open data to a degree, and it becomes quite sort of so flexible that it can almost be meaningless. Pushing it. So open washing is a threat, I think. Countries that are launching open data initiatives, and I'm thinking sort of a number of different countries, I won't sort of name names, but across the globe, countries launching...
What do you mean you won't name names?
Countries launching open data initiative that are perhaps not as ambitious or committed as they could be. I think that's a big threat. Yeah. And that's why engaging civil society and groups in the media to monitor those open data initiatives and have an understanding of what the standard is really important. I think there's another threat, which is a softer one, a more insidious one, which is truly for the success of this agenda globally, it mustn't be siloed, I think, which is a slightly different type of threat. But what I mean is, to be successful, the agenda that government information at least should be public, in open formats and comparable and interoperable. This vision that sort of people have of connecting different data sets has to cut across a number of different sectors, whether it's health or transport or government budgets, etc. And there the threat is it becomes a nice little geeky thing that we put in a box, and there's open data programs and open data people, etc. It's a bit like the gender mainstreaming argument. It has to be mainstreamed across all sectors, and that's something we're not very good at doing. So.
Paul, from the government point of view, I mean, that's, can I call you out what you see the threat?
I've worked in various different bits of sort of, if you like, cutting-edge public service reforms, and honestly, I've not seen an area that has such a fair wind. So I'm a bit sceptical of calling out the threats, right? But there's a number of challenges, of course, there is always. I think we've got to make sure that that we actually do get all the data out, and out in an appropriate, meaningful way, and at all different levels of the state, so not just central government, but many others in local government too. I think there's also something of, does the reality of the coding, if you like, match up with the hype around the discussion at the political and policy level. So, I remain, eager to see all those amazing applications. We've all got, say, our own favourite, but I think we're always on the lookout for some of the truly transformative applications. And in some ways, I think one of the dangers is that we're thinking about open data, but we should just be thinking about data, and open data as one aspect of this data revolution that, in businesses, people are looking at all different sources of data, including government open data. So if we're measuring a success of our open data achievements via open data applications, we may be missing the bigger picture. So there's this sort of keeping the reality in check with the ambition, I suppose.
Rufus,
but really, but there's so many opportunities.
Yeah. But sanguine. About anything at all?
I think there are kind of a couple of things that I worry about. I mean, I have to say I don't worry about right now, but one is that we're the Open Knowledge Foundation, we're not the Open Data Foundation per se, and part of that is because we don't really care about open data, right? I mean, open data doesn't matter in itself. We don't sit there. I mean, maybe some of us do, but at night going, one more open data set, in my data store. It's because that data turns into something. It turns into a better understanding of the world, and more importantly, often change. Someone taking a different decision. Now, if that's a policymaker, it's maybe a decision that then affects lots of people, or maybe it's just an individual eating different food, or feeling differently about their taxes, or whatever. And that chain involves quite a lot else than the data. That involves people, it involves tools, and I suppose I do worry about. I worry about that chain, and I worry that one of the things at the moment is that we have the open data, which is great, and one of the reasons I, at least, at the Open Knowledge, care about it, because it's empowering. I think it's particularly empowering for people who aren't so empowered right now, but that they don't have the tools. So we have a kind of world not to be bad to Google or Microsoft or whatever, but to say, oh well, it's like I once talked with someone from a company I was running earlier. So I was like, well, for me, it's not just enough if we have that data. What about the tools? I need to be empowered to understand and to use the stuff myself. And if the story's just like, hey, there's all this open data, and then some multi-billion-dollar company can just provide all the infrastructure, and you're beholden to us to do that analysis, then I think that's a big loss. And I think the other thing that relates to Martin is that sense of this being a movement. The reason also I care about this is because of its chance to be a bit of to change. There's something we can do in information that's radically different from other goods. There's a general story of me coming to you and going, hey everybody, it would be beautiful if we just shared. People have said that, and it's been a very attractive idea for a long time, and the general history of those experiments is very poor, bluntly, on physical goods. But that's kind of what we're saying, and it's somehow different because information is different. And there is something pretty amazing that we're moving into a world, of that science fiction, where the main things we're producing is this ethereal stuff, knowledge and information. And we kind of have options about how that world looks like. It can be a world of squalor where there's some of the rich skyscrapers and everyone else is down in the gutter, or we can have worlds that are quite different about how that information is shared, how we collaborate, how we build insight and knowledge together, how we address problems together. And for me, I think open data is the heart of that, and I think there's a danger of it just becoming normalcy. It's just like, it's a better way to slightly deliver public services a bit better. No, this is a way for us to alter the structure of the knowledge society in the 21st century.
Well, that's good. That was more, right, that's kind of... What would you say to that? I mean, in terms of the notion of things to be alert to or possibly even worrying about.
I think open washing is one of the most serious problems there in APAC, because you're seeing the government are taking initiatives or approaches or launching a lot of data portals, but not on the central government level because it's hard to work on the central level. But for some of the smaller jurisdictions like the city or like the counties, they are launching a lot of data portals. So for example, in Taiwan alone, we have around maybe 12 data portals by city governments, and that amounts to about half of the population in Taiwan. But nobody's actually using that. So they are, because it's a hot topic and it's everybody loves open data, and you just put some of these old program on top of open data and try to assimilate all the ideas, tasks, and resources into their own programs like e-government, cloud, security, strategy, or even big data. So we are seeing a trend of, especially in Taiwan, we are seeing that you have a building, a construction building called the block. Before 10 years ago, and now we are seeing trends in that the building will facilitate your app business. Probably later on, we are seeing the trend of some of the construction companies branding their construction as open data, friendly. Well, that's the truth over there. So I think open washing is one of the biggest challenges and threats to open data. And another thing is about the demand side of open data. You don't encourage demand of open
Martin,
data.
I'll take a question, then I'm going to throw some questions up to the audience, and then come back to the panel. Yeah.
Just a quick one on that. I think they're linked, the open washing point and the demand point, which is, I don't think open washing is necessary. I completely agree with you. I don't think open washing is necessary.
Does everybody in the audience know what this secret phrase refers to? A lot of people are going, what are they talking about? Okay. Decode it.
I mean, I think it can mean two things. Open washing could mean a government that's not genuinely open and doesn't put information openly in the public, and then tries to take credit for just a few things that it's doing on the margins. That's one argument. I think another one as well, I would argue, a sort of, in some ways, more radical interpretation of open washing is you just dump a lot of information out there, but you don't make any efforts to really understand and get people to use it, whether it's companies or citizens. And if you include that, I think that's really prevalent. And I think historically, the transparency movement, we've been much better at pushing for information to be made public, and then we've sat back. And we've been really weak at understanding why and how people and the media and companies would use that information. And I think that's a huge risk that we need to confront.